The afternoon sun was shining brightly over a quiet suburban neighborhood, where families strolled and children played, a place that seemed calm and welcoming. But beneath this peaceful surface, something unexpected was about to shake the community to its core. At the center of it all was Marcus, a confident black man who had saved for years, dreaming of buying his first home, a beautiful house he spotted online that seemed perfect. What Marcus didn't expect was that, instead of being greeted with a warm welcome at the open house, some people in the neighborhood would see him through a very different lens. As Marcus arrived, dressed sharply and carrying a thick envelope filled with cash, he was ready to make an offer that would surprise everyone. But the moment he stepped onto the front porch, a neighbor's suspicious gaze turned into a call to the police. They assumed the worst, convinced that Marcus didn't belong there, that he was some kind of threat. This wasn't just a case of mistaken identity, it was a moment charged with racial profiling, a painful reminder of how quickly assumptions can take over. While Marcus stood calmly, waiting to meet the realtor, sirens suddenly cut through the air. 2 police cars pulled up, lights flashing. Neighbors gathered, whispering and watching, their eyes full of questions and unease. Marcus was asked to explain himself, and the tension in the street grew thick. Why would anyone call the cops on a man simply looking to buy a house? And more importantly, how would this moment change everything for everyone involved? But here's the twist, Marcus wasn't just any potential buyer. He was prepared to pay for the house in cash, a detail that shocked the real estate agent and the neighbors alike. This unexpected truth quickly spread beyond the quiet street, going viral online and sparking conversations across the nation about prejudice, assumptions, and justice. Suddenly, the neighborhood found itself under a spotlight it never wanted, forcing the residents to face uncomfortable questions about race, trust, and fairness. As the story unfolds, you'll meet the family who made the call, a family whose fear and misunderstanding set this chain of events in motion. They believed they were protecting their community, but instead, they learned a painful lesson about the harm that can come from jumping to conclusions. Meanwhile, Marcus's quiet dignity and determination opened eyes and hearts, reminding everyone that appearances can be deceiving, and that kindness and respect should always come first. This story is about more than just one man, one house, or one call to the police. It's about the power of assumptions and the courage it takes to challenge them. It's about a community forced to look in the mirror and ask what kind of place they really want to be. And it's about the ripple effect that one moment of injustice can have, spreading far beyond the streets where it began. But what happened next? How did Marcus handle the police, the neighbors, and the viral attention? Did he get the house he dreamed of, or did the moment become a barrier he couldn't overcome? And what about the family who called the cops? How did their world change when the truth came out? Stay with us as we dive deeper into this unforgettable story of racial profiling, instant karma, and a lesson that shook an entire neighborhood. The answer might surprise you, and it's a reminder that sometimes, the truth has a way of coming out in the most unexpected ways. Don't go anywhere, the real story is just beginning. Marcus had been working toward this moment for years. He wasn't some impulsive buyer or someone just browsing out of curiosity. For him, owning a home was a symbol of everything he'd fought for: stability, security, and a fresh start. He grew up in a small apartment in the city, watched his parents struggle to make ends meet, and always dreamed of a place where he could build a life free from worry. Saving every dollar, working overtime, and keeping his focus, Marcus finally had enough to make a serious offer, one that would put him ahead of any other buyer. That's why when he saw the listing for the house in this quiet neighborhood, he knew it was the one. The tree-lined street, the cozy porch, the well-kept yard, it all felt like the perfect place to call home. So, when the open house was scheduled, Marcus cleared his calendar and made the trip. He pictured himself walking through the rooms, imagining where his furniture would go, thinking about the life he could build there. What he didn't picture was the suspicion in the eyes of people who didn't know him, the quick judgment, or the call to the police that would turn this hopeful day into something so much more complicated. On the other side of the street, the family who called the cops was equally sure they were doing the right thing. The Hendersons had lived in the neighborhood for decades. They prided themselves on keeping things safe and peaceful. When they saw Marcus walk up to the house, a man they didn't recognize, carrying no paperwork and looking serious, their minds jumped to the worst. Why is he here? What's he doing? Mrs. Henderson whispered to her husband. Instead of stopping to say hello or ask questions, they picked up the phone. This split-second decision was rooted in fear and assumptions about race, about who belongs, and who doesn't. It was a moment charged with unspoken history, shaped by experiences and stories they had heard, not the reality standing right in front of them. Their call set the police in motion, and once the officers arrived, the situation escalated quickly. Marcus was asked questions, and though he answered calmly and clearly, the tension didn't ease. Onlookers gathered, some curious, others anxious. Phones came out, and the moment started to spread on social media, dividing opinion and sparking heated debate. Meanwhile, Marcus stood firm, his calmness a quiet defiance against the unfairness of it all. He knew the weight of those eyes on him, the silent judgment, but he refused to let it shake him. His offer was ready, the cash in his hands real, and his intentions clear. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter to the crowd or the officers. The viral video of the incident captured the attention of thousands, people all across the country who saw the tension, the fear, and the injustice unfold. It wasn't just a story about a man trying to buy a house anymore, it was a powerful example of racial profiling and the real impact it has on lives. People began sharing their own stories, their own experiences with prejudice, and the conversation quickly grew beyond just this one neighborhood. At the same time, the Henderson family found themselves at the center of an unexpected storm. Friends and neighbors questioned their actions. Messages flooded in. Some supportive, but many critical and hurtful. They began to realize that their quick call, meant to protect, had triggered something far bigger than they imagined. How would they face their neighbors now? Could they explain why they reacted the way they did? And more importantly, would they be willing to learn from this moment? As the sun began to set on that quiet street, the questions remained unanswered. Marcus's fate, the neighborhood's future, and the lesson the Hendersons had yet to fully grasp, all hanging in the balance. What started as a hopeful day to buy a home had turned into a story that no one would soon forget. And as the cameras kept rolling and the world watched, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. The days after that tense afternoon were filled with a whirlwind of emotions and challenges. Marcus found himself at the center of a storm he never asked for. He wanted nothing more than to buy a home and start fresh, but suddenly he was thrust into the uncomfortable spotlight of a neighborhood debate and a national conversation about racial profiling and justice. His calm exterior hid the frustration and hurt he felt every time he thought about how quickly people had judged him, a man who had done nothing wrong except show up with the means to buy a house. Meanwhile, the Henderson family was struggling with their own turmoil. The backlash they faced was unlike anything they had experienced before. Longtime neighbors who once exchanged friendly hellos now avoided eye contact or whispered behind their backs. Some neighbors openly criticized their decision to call the police, while others tried to defend it, saying they were just protecting the community. Inside their home, the tension was palpable. Conversations that used to be light and easy now turned into arguments and tears. The question that haunted them was clear. Had they let fear cloud their judgment in a way that could never be undone? Adding another layer to the conflict, the local real estate agent who had been preparing for Marcus's offer found herself caught in the middle. She had never imagined her open house would become such a headline story. Her role was simple: sell the house, but now she had to navigate the delicate balance between a community divided by suspicion and a buyer determined to prove his worth beyond prejudice. She knew Marcus had the cash ready and the desire to close the deal, yet the neighborhood's growing tension made every step forward more complicated. The local police department also came under scrutiny. Officers involved in the call were asked to explain their response to the situation, and questions were raised about training and bias. For some in the community, the incident was a harsh reminder of how racial profiling can escalate quickly, even in peaceful neighborhoods. For others, it sparked a defensive pushback, fueling debates over safety, trust, and the role of law enforcement. The neighborhood became a microcosm of a larger national issue, one that was raw, painful, and far from resolved. As the story unfolded online, social media became a battleground. Supporters of Marcus flooded platforms with messages of encouragement and calls for justice, while others expressed doubt or dismissed the situation as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. News outlets picked up the story, interviewing neighbors, experts, and activists. The voices were many, and the opinions varied widely, but the one constant was the unresolved tension, the uncomfortable questions that hung over every conversation like a thick fog. Back in the neighborhood, the divide deepened. Some families who had never really talked before now found themselves taking sides. Community meetings were called, but instead of healing, they often brought more conflict to the surface. The idea of safety, belonging, and fairness became points of contention, and Marcus, the Hendersons, and the others found themselves reluctant symbols in a much bigger debate. Through it all, Marcus remained focused on his goal. Buying that house wasn't just about owning property, it was about claiming a piece of the American dream that had often felt out of reach. But with every passing day, the challenge grew. Would the neighborhood ever truly accept him? Would the money in his hands be enough to break down the walls of suspicion? Or was the real battle something deeper, a fight against assumptions and fears that no amount of cash could fix? This was more than a story about one man and one house. It was a story about a community caught between fear and understanding, about a family grappling with their conscience, and about the difficult, often painful journey toward change. And as the chapters of this story continued to unfold, one thing was certain. The tension was far from over, and the real test was just beginning. The tension in the neighborhood was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Every day, Marcus felt the weight of eyes on him, some filled with curiosity, others with suspicion or even resentment. The house that once represented hope now felt like a battleground, a symbol of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. He tried to keep his focus, reminding himself why he was there in the first place. But even his calm resolve was starting to crack under the pressure. The whispers, the side glances, the judgment, it all built up like a storm on the horizon, threatening to break at any moment. The Henderson family was unraveling, too. Their quiet life was shattered. They had expected to feel safe after their decision, but instead, they found themselves isolated, facing uncomfortable questions from friends, neighbors, even strangers online. Mrs. Henderson stayed up late, scrolling through comments that ranged from angry to sympathetic. Mr. Henderson paced the house, struggling to explain to his children why the world suddenly felt so divided. The guilt and doubt crept in, gnawing at them both. Were they right to call the police? Or had their fear caused more harm than good? The answers felt impossible to find. At the same time, the local real estate agent was growing anxious. The house's listing had drawn attention far beyond the usual buyers. Calls from reporters, social media messages, and angry emails filled her inbox. She wanted to do right by Marcus, who had been nothing but professional and patient, but the neighborhood's unrest was making the sale more complicated by the day. Every time she arranged a meeting or a viewing, the tension in the air was palpable. The community was watching, waiting to see how this story would unfold, and they weren't all on the same side. The police officers involved faced intense scrutiny. Their department launched an internal review, and public pressure mounted for transparency and accountability. For the officers, it was a difficult balancing act, standing by their actions while facing a community divided and a man wronged. The spotlight wasn't just on Marcus or the Hendersons anymore, it was on the entire system that allowed moments like this to happen. Online, the story exploded. Viral videos, news reports, and personal stories flooded feeds. Hashtags calling for justice trended, while others defended the neighborhood's concerns. The clash of voices created a digital battleground mirroring the one on the quiet street. Marcus's name was everywhere, but so was controversy. Supporters saw him as a symbol of resilience and dignity. Critics questioned the narrative, digging for reasons to justify what had happened. The pressure mounted, and the story became a test of courage and conviction for everyone involved. Back in the neighborhood, emotions reached a boiling point. A community meeting was called, meant to calm nerves and bring people together. Instead, it sparked a heated confrontation. Voices rose, accusations flew, and long-held grievances surfaced. Marcus spoke calmly, trying to explain his side, his dream, and his pain. The Hendersons shared their fears and regrets. But instead of understanding, the room was filled with more tension and unresolved anger. It was clear this was not a story that could be neatly wrapped up with an apology or a handshake. The night after the meeting, Marcus stood on the porch of the house he hoped to buy, looking out at the street bathed in the glow of streetlights. He thought about everything that had happened, the suspicion, the viral attention, the divided neighborhood. His heart was heavy, but he knew the real challenge was still ahead. The moment when everything could change, or fall apart completely, was coming fast. What would the neighbors decide? Would the family who called the police find a way to make amends? Could the house still become Marcus's home? Or was this just the beginning of a deeper struggle, one that would test the very soul of the community? The answers were hanging in the balance, and the next steps would be the most important of all. The stage was set for a confrontation that no one could predict, and no one would forget. Just when it seemed like the neighborhood couldn't get any more divided, an unexpected twist sent shockwaves through the community. A few days after the heated meeting, a video surfaced online, one that showed Marcus arriving at the open house, but this time with a surprising companion. It wasn't a friend or family member, but the previous homeowner, an elderly white man who had lived in the house for over 30 years. The man, Mr. Whitman, appeared in the footage calmly walking alongside Marcus, nodding in approval as Marcus handed over the envelope filled with cash. This revelation flipped the entire story on its head. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't just an outsider trying to buy a house, he was connected to the very history of the home and the neighborhood itself. Mr. Whitman's presence seemed to confirm that Marcus was more than qualified, more than welcomed, yet the initial call to the police still lingered as a painful contradiction. Why, if the former owner had accepted Marcus so willingly, had some neighbors reacted with such suspicion and fear? The neighborhood was buzzing with questions. Social media exploded again, this time with people sharing the new video and debating its meaning. Supporters argued it showed that Marcus had legitimacy and respect, making the earlier police call all the more unjust. Others claimed the video was staged or questioned Mr. Whitman's role, stirring controversy once more. The story was no longer just about racial profiling, it had become a deeper investigation into trust, ownership, and the complicated history of the neighborhood. Meanwhile, the Henderson family found themselves even more under pressure. Neighbors who once sympathized with their fear now wondered aloud if their judgment had been clouded by bias, not just caution. Private conversations turned into public accusations. The family received messages from local community leaders urging them to address the damage their call had caused. The weight of regret pressed heavily on them, forcing them to question everything they thought they knew about their community, and themselves. Marcus, on the other hand, faced new challenges. The viral video brought more attention, yes, but also more scrutiny. Reporters sought interviews, neighbors questioned his every move, and even the real estate agent worried the escalating drama would kill the sale. Marcus's dream home was now the center of a battle far bigger than property lines or money. It had become a symbol of justice, prejudice, and the struggle for belonging. The police department felt the heat as well. With the new video showing Mr. Whitman's support, many questioned the officers' actions more sharply than before. Was their response really justified, or had racial bias clouded their judgment from the start? Internal investigations accelerated, and community groups demanded change, while some officers felt unfairly attacked. adding another layer of complexity to the situation. Tensions reached a boiling point one evening when a group of neighbors gathered near the house, some to support Marcus, others to confront the Hendersons, and a few to simply watch what would happen next. Voices rose, emotions flared, and just as things threatened to explode, a loud crash echoed from inside the house, a broken window shattered, glass scattering across the floor. No one knew who was responsible, and the mystery only added fuel to the fire. Now, the neighborhood stood on the edge of a breaking point. The story had moved far beyond a simple home sale or a suspicious call to the police. It was about community, identity, fear, and hope, all tangled together in a way that seemed impossible to untangle. The question hanging over everyone's heads was clear: could this neighborhood heal, or was the fracture too deep? And for Marcus, the real test was just beginning. The stakes had never been higher, and the next move could change everything, but no one knew what would come next. The night the broken window shattered the fragile peace, everything came to a head. Marcus, standing on the porch of the house he hoped to call his own, saw neighbors gathering again, this time, not just to watch but to demand answers. Voices filled the air, but amid the noise, a surprising figure stepped forward, Mr. Whitman, the former homeowner. Calm but firm, he raised his hand for silence. "I lived in this house for over 30 years, he said, his voice steady. "When Marcus came to me, ready to buy it with cash, I saw a man who respected this place and what it means. The way some of you reacted, calling the police, it wasn't right. We have to do better. We have to trust each other." His words cut through the tension, but the real test was yet to come. Just as the crowd seemed to begin listening, police cars arrived, lights flashing. Officers stepped out and announced they had found the person responsible for the broken window, a teenager from the neighborhood, who confessed to acting out of frustration and fear, caught in the middle of a conflict bigger than himself. The revelation shocked everyone. It was a painful reminder that the tensions and divisions didn't just come from one side. The broken window wasn't just a physical crack in a home but a symbol of a community struggling to heal. Marcus stepped forward, offering a hand to the Henderson family, who stood watching silently. "I'm not here to fight you," Marcus said. "I'm here to build something better, a home, yes, but also a community where we see each other for who we really are." Mrs. Henderson, her eyes filled with tears, nodded slowly. "We made mistakes," she said. "We let fear win that day. But we want to make it right." The crowd began to soften. Conversations opened, apologies were exchanged, and a fragile hope took root. The police promised to improve training and community relations, while neighbors started planning ways to come together beyond this painful moment. Just when it seemed the story was settling, an unexpected twist surfaced. The real estate agent revealed that the house wasn't just a simple sale, it had been caught in a legal dispute for months, linked to a larger development plan that could change the entire neighborhood. Marcus's purchase was more than personal. It was a challenge to those plans, a fight to preserve the neighborhood's heart and soul. This revelation sparked a new wave of urgency and purpose. The community faced not just healing from division but standing united to protect the place they called home from outside forces. Marcus wasn't just buying a house anymore, he was helping lead a movement. As the crowd slowly dispersed that night, the future was still uncertain. But one thing was clear: what began as a story of suspicion and racial profiling had grown into something much bigger, a chance for change, for understanding, and for a neighborhood to redefine itself. And as Marcus looked back at the house one last time before heading home, he knew this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one with challenges ahead, but also hope that, this time, wouldn't be broken. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood began to slowly shift. The sharp lines drawn by fear and suspicion started to blur, replaced by cautious conversations and tentative steps toward understanding. Marcus moved into his new home, a place that once felt like a battleground but was now a symbol of hope and change. Every box unpacked, every picture hung, felt like a small victory, not just for him, but for the community that had been forced to confront its own biases and fears. The Henderson family, too, took meaningful steps forward. They reached out to Marcus personally, inviting him and his family to neighborhood gatherings and community events. It wasn't easy for anyone, old wounds didn't heal overnight, but their willingness to admit mistakes and seek reconciliation planted seeds for new relationships. The children, once caught in the middle of grown-up conflicts, found themselves playing together in parks and sharing stories, bridging gaps that had seemed impossible to cross just months before. The police department followed through on its promises to improve training and communication. Officers attended workshops on bias and community engagement, and regular meetings were held to keep the dialogue open between law enforcement and residents. While trust would take time to rebuild, these efforts signaled a commitment to do better, a vital step toward healing the fractures exposed by that fateful day. Marcus's role in the neighborhood grew beyond homeowner. He became an advocate, working alongside local leaders to preserve the character and integrity of the community amid pressures from outside developers. His purchase of the house wasn't just a real estate transaction. It was a statement that this neighborhood belonged to its people, and that inclusivity and respect were the foundations for its future. The viral story that had once brought division now inspired unity and activism. Social media quieted down as the headlines faded, but the lessons lingered. People talked less about the controversy and more about the changes sparked by it. The neighborhood, once fractured by fear and misunderstanding, was finding a new identity rooted in honesty and connection. The painful experience had forced everyone to look inward, to question assumptions and confront uncomfortable truths. And in doing so, they discovered the possibility of something better. As Marcus sat on his front porch one evening, watching the sunset over the quiet street, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in a long time. The journey had been harder than he imagined, filled with moments of doubt and frustration. But it had also shown him the strength of community when it chooses empathy over suspicion, courage over fear. The house wasn't just a place to live, it was a symbol of resilience, of progress, and of the ongoing fight for justice and understanding. The story of that open house, the calls, the accusations, the viral videos, had touched thousands, maybe millions. But for Marcus and his neighbors, it was more than a headline. It was a reminder that change often begins with difficult conversations and that true healing requires listening, humility, and a willingness to grow. And while the neighborhood's journey was far from over, they had taken a vital first step toward a future where everyone could belong, no matter their color, their background, or the cash in their pockets. In the end, what started as a moment of fear became a turning point for hope, showing that even the deepest divides can be bridged when people choose to see each other's humanity first.